It was a cloudy Wednesday morning in a quiet southern town where everyone knew everyone, and uniforms still meant something. The streets were just beginning to stir with life. Coffee shops opening, school buses honking, and the local diner frying up bacon. But on this particular morning, something happened that would change not only one man's life, but shake the very foundation of how authority was viewed in that town. Officer Wade Simmons had worked the morning shift for over a decade. Known for his hard stance and a chip on his shoulder, Wade wasn't exactly loved by the community, especially not by people of color. His badge gave him a sense of control, something he didn't hide. To most, he was just another power-hungry officer who treated some citizens differently than others. But no one had ever seriously challenged him. Until that day. At exactly 8:12 a.m., a sleek, dark car pulled into a parking spot near the county courthouse. Out stepped a tall, sharply dressed black man, probably in his late 40s, wearing a subtle pin on his lapel that read, National Bureau of Law Enforcement Affairs. He looked calm, poised, the kind of presence that turns heads, without saying a word. His name was Director Marcus Ellison. What most people didn't know, and what Officer Simmons certainly didn't care to find out, was that Marcus Ellison wasn't just some federal employee. He was the Director of Law Enforcement Oversight, one of the top-ranking officials responsible for investigating and monitoring misconduct within local police departments across the country. He had flown in quietly without an escort to conduct an unannounced assessment following numerous complaints about racism and abuse of power in that precinct. The irony? He hadn't even stepped inside the building before becoming a victim himself. Wade spotted Marcus getting out of his vehicle. To him, the man looked suspicious, a term often used to cover up bias. Without even asking for ID, Wade approached aggressively, hand already on his holster. He barked out questions laced with suspicion, his tone sharp, dismissive, and demeaning. Marcus, calm and measured, introduced himself and reached into his coat pocket to retrieve his credentials. That's when Wade lost it. He grabbed Marcus's wrist and yanked it behind his back, ignoring his protests and the small federal badge that had briefly flashed in the daylight. He slammed the man onto the hood of his own car and cuffed him. Onlookers began to gather. Phones came out, cameras started recording. One elderly woman gasped. Another man dressed in scrubs yelled, "He's a federal agent! You just arrested a federal agent!" But Wade was too far gone in his ego to hear anything but his own authority. Marcus said nothing. He didn't resist. He simply looked at Wade with a calm that came from years of knowing power wasn't always loud, and that sometimes true power speaks through silence. Meanwhile, just a few blocks away, on a crowded city bus, a completely different story was folding. A 17-year-old black teenager named Jamal sat in the middle row, headphones in, backpack on his lap, looking out the window. His stop was still 10 minutes away. Across from him stood a pregnant white woman, her hands gently resting on her stomach, clearly tired, yet no one had offered her a seat. Jamal noticed her struggling to keep her balance as the bus jolted forward. Without a word, he stood up and motioned for her to sit. She looked surprised at first, but then smiled warmly and accepted. As she sat down, she pulled out a small envelope from her purse and handed it to Jamal. He blinked. "What's this?" "Open. When you get home," she said softly. Jamal slipped the note into his pocket and smiled back. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at that moment, just a quiet act of kindness. But what was written inside that envelope would go on to change Jamal's life forever. Back at the courthouse, word was spreading fast. Within 5 minutes of cuffing Marcus, dispatch radios began buzzing. Officers rushed outside. A lieutenant recognized Marcus immediately, and his face turned pale. The cuffs came off in seconds, apologies pouring out clumsily, but the damage was already done. Marcus didn't shout. He didn't curse. He didn't need to. He simply looked Officer Wade in the eyes and said, "I was going to meet with your chief, but I think I'll start this review with you." Wade didn't know it yet, but his career was hanging by a thread. His badge, his pride, all of it, crumbling. The cameras had caught everything. And Marcus, well, he wasn't just a victim. He was the man with the power to end every ounce of authority Wade ever thought he had. And while one man's fall was beginning, a teenager's rise was already in motion. The envelope in Jamal's pocket was more than just paper. It was a doorway, a silent key to something he never expected, because sometimes the smallest actions echo the loudest. What was in that note? Who exactly was the pregnant woman? And how did Jamal's simple act of kindness connect to a scandal that would soon explode across the nation? The answers were coming. But for now, the town held its breath, standing on the edge of a storm no one saw coming. Jamal stepped off the bus feeling like it was just another ordinary day. He had no idea that his simple action, offering his seat, was already being talked about by people who weren't even on the bus. He walked the familiar cracked sidewalks of his neighborhood, past the barber shop where old men sat on milk crates playing checkers, past the corner store where Ms. Linda always gave him free candy when she saw he was having a hard day. Everything felt normal. But the envelope in his pocket weighed heavy, like it was trying to whisper to him that something big had just happened. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he kept it in his jacket as he made his way home, his mind still on his math test later that afternoon. Jamal lived in a small apartment with his grandmother, a woman who raised him after his mother passed away when he was 10. She was a former school teacher, tough, wise, and full of those old sayings that always seemed to come true. She noticed the envelope as soon as he walked in. "Boy, what you got there?" Jamal shrugged. "Just something a lady gave me on the bus. She was pregnant and I gave her my seat. She handed it to me and told me to open it later." His grandmother eyed him closely. "Well, later looks like now to me." Jamal smiled, sat down at the small dining table, and gently opened the flap. Inside was a neatly folded note with clean, looping handwriting. He started to read, out loud, but as the words unfolded, he went quiet. His eyes scanned the letter once, then twice. His hands trembled slightly. It wasn't money. It wasn't a thank you card. It was something else entirely. "Dear young man," it began. "You don't know me, but today you reminded me that there is still kindness in the world. What you did was simple, but powerful. Most people ignored me. You didn't. You saw me. That matters. You may not realize this now, but you just changed something big. I want to help you, but not just yet. Someone will contact you soon. Trust it, and stay kind." There was no signature, no number, no name. Just that strange, chilling sentence. "You just changed something big." Jamal stared at the paper, his mind spinning. He wanted to believe it was a joke, some weird, random act, but something in his gut said no, this was different. He didn't tell his grandmother everything, not yet. He folded the letter and placed it in his notebook, trying to focus on his test prep. But every time he tried to think of equations, the woman's words echoed back. Across town, the mood was very different. In the police station, Officer Wade sat in the break room, his leg bouncing nervously under the table. He'd been called in by the chief, twice, but so far no one had said a word to him. His radio had gone silent. The usual nods from fellow officers were missing. Everyone was tense. He kept replaying the moment in his head. The way he cuffed that man. The way everyone froze when they realized who he was. And now the waiting was driving him mad. Wade thought about what he'd say if he got called in. That it was a misunderstanding. That the guy didn't look like a federal agent. That he was just doing his job. But deep down, even he didn't believe it. In another room, Director Marcus Ellison sat calmly with the police chief, a serious but composed man named Harold King. Chief King had worked hard over the years to clean up the department, but Wade had always been a problem. Complaints had piled up, racial profiling, excessive force, disrespectful behavior, but nothing ever stuck. Till now. Marcus placed a tablet on the chief's desk. On it was the video footage, clear, steady, and undeniable. It showed Wade walking up aggressively, ignoring Marcus's ID, twisting his arm, and cuffing him without reason. "I was coming here to talk about community trust," Marcus said, his voice cool and level. "Now, I'll be issuing a full departmental review. Chief King swallowed hard. He knew what that meant: federal oversight, reports, scrutiny, public backlash, and likely firings. You want me to suspend him? The chief asked quietly. I want you to do what you would do if this had happened to anyone else in this town, Marcus replied. Because today, it did. The silence in the room felt thick. Chief King slowly nodded and reached for the phone. Meanwhile, Jamal was still wrestling with the letter. He tried to shake it off, to tell himself it didn't mean anything. But that wasn't easy when his phone buzzed 2 hours later with an unknown number and a message that read, "We saw what you did. Don't ignore what's coming next." There was no name, no context, just that. Jamal's heart pounded. He showed it to his grandmother, who gave him a hard look. You sure this lady wasn't part of something? She asked. I don't know, he replied. She seemed normal, kind. His grandmother sat down beside him, took his hand gently, and said, Kindness makes ripples, baby. But sometimes, it also draws attention you're not ready for. That night, Jamal couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, wondering who the woman was, what he had gotten pulled into, and whether he should be scared or excited. He didn't know it yet, but that note wasn't just a thank you. It was an invitation, and the people behind it had been watching. Back at the station, Officer Wade was finally called into the chief's office. He walked in, trying to stand tall, but his hands were sweating. The chief didn't say much, just pushed a document across the table and said, Sign it. What is this? Wade asked. Termination papers, effective immediately. Wade's face drained of color. You can't be serious. The chief leaned forward. 5 minutes. That's all it took for you to do what years of complaints couldn't prove. You embarrassed this department. And now you've made it federal. Wade stood up abruptly, rage burning in his eyes. You're siding with him over me? The chief didn't flinch. I'm siding with the truth, Wade stormed out, his badge sliding from the table as he went. No applause, no support, just the sound of a door slamming shut. But Marcus wasn't done. He stood outside the station, phone in hand, watching Wade leave. He dialed a number and spoke only 4 words. Activate the next phase. The wind picked up slightly. Leaves. Spinning through the parking lot as if the whole town sensed something shifting. And across the city, Jamal's phone lit up again. This time with a video file. He hesitated, then pressed play. It was footage from the bus, of him standing up, of the woman smiling, of her slipping him the note. The video ended with a close-up of her face, and in the final seconds, she looked straight at the camera and winked. Jamal sat frozen. Who was she? Why was someone recording? And why did it feel like this was only the beginning? Jamal stared at the screen long after the video ended. He watched it again, slower this time, pausing at the moment the pregnant woman looked into the camera. That wink, it wasn't random. It was too specific, too directed. It was like she knew someone was watching, like she knew it would reach him later. He rewound to the moment she handed him the envelope. There, just for a split second, her fingers grazed the inside of his palm, almost like she was passing something else. But he hadn't felt anything. He sat back in his chair, heart racing. Whoever she wasn't just another passenger. She was planted there, or at least connected to something bigger. But why him? Why pick him? What did giving up a bus seat have to do with encrypted texts, surveillance footage, and mystery messages? Across town, Marcus Ellison was deep into briefing, his internal task force. He had flown in quietly for a reason. This department wasn't just about one bad cop. It had been on a watch list for a while. Reports of racism, cover-ups, planted evidence, and a disturbing number of complaints from young black residents. It wasn't just policy failure. It was a culture problem. And Marcus, after being humiliated, in front of cameras, now had the full authority to dig deeper. He wasn't working alone. 2 agents from his internal affairs team had already arrived, one posing as a city contractor and the other quietly interviewing civilians in public spaces. They had one job: gather ground truth without tipping off anyone still loyal to Wade Simmons. Because Simmons may have lost his badge, but people like him didn't just disappear. They whispered. They stirred up trouble. They protected their own. What Marcus hadn't expected, however, was the side message he received late that night. It came from a private network, one used only in extreme secure cases. No subject line, just a message. "Watch the bus kid. He's connected." Not an accident, Marcus frowned. That had nothing to do with the precinct investigation. Or did it? He clicked the attached file. It was the same bus footage Jamal had received. He watched it closely. The boy stood, gave up his seat, smiled, and sat back down. Harmless. Except, when the woman handed him the note, she glanced briefly at the bus camera, just once, then smiled, then winked. Marcus leaned back. This wasn't coincidence. Someone had planned for him to see this. But why connect the investigation of a corrupt police department to a teenage boy on a city bus? Meanwhile, Jamal had started noticing strange things. A black SUV was parked across the street the next morning. It wasn't from the neighborhood. The windows were tinted dark, and the engine stayed running even when no one got out. He tried to ignore it, told himself it was just paranoia. But when he saw the same SUV later near his school, parked 2 blocks away, facing the entrance, his stomach dropped. He didn't tell anyone. Not yet. But he kept the note in his backpack now, zipped tight right next to his homework, and the cheap prepaid phone he used to stay off-grid when things got weird. At school, everything felt the same, but he started paying attention. Were people watching him? Was someone following him in the halls? Even his favorite teacher, Mr. Taylor, seemed off that day, glancing at Jamal more than usual, like he was expecting something. Jamal couldn't shake the feeling that he was being monitored, tested even. That evening, his phone rang again. No caller ID. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" "Don't speak," said a calm, low voice. "Just listen. You did something small, but it shook the right eyes. You were seen. That's not always a bad thing, but it means things will come faster now. You'll receive something soon. Don't share it. Don't ignore it. It will explain more." Before Jamal could say a word, the call disconnected. He stood there frozen, phone still to his ear, as a knock came at the door. His grandmother answered. A delivery driver stood there with a small brown package, no return address. "For Jamal," he said. No smile, just handed it over and walked off without another word. Inside, Jamal sat at the kitchen table, heart thumping, as he slowly opened the box. Inside wasn't what he expected. It was an old photo. A faded black and white image of 3 men in police uniforms, 1 white, 2 black. They stood in front of an old station building, arms crossed, faces unreadable. On the back, written in the same handwriting from the note, "Ask about 1996. Ask about what they buried." He turned it over again, trying to make sense of the faces. One of them looked familiar, very familiar, like someone he might have seen before. His grandmother passed by, glanced at the photo, and stopped in her tracks. "Where'd you get that?" she asked, voice tight. "It came just now." "Do you know them?" She stared long and hard. "I knew. One. The man on the left. That's your grandfather's brother, your great-uncle Charles." Jamal blinked. "I have a great-uncle?" He was a cop. Good man. Real quiet, though. Left town in the late 90s. Said he couldn't stay here anymore. Something about what he saw, what they were doing in the department. He never told us everything, just that it wasn't safe. Jamal stared at the photo again. The name on the badge, C. Ellison. His pulse jumped. "Ellison?" he whispered. His grandmother nodded. "Yeah, Charles Ellison." "Why?" Jamal didn't answer. He knew now this wasn't random, not even close. Marcus Ellison was the federal director, and Charles Ellison might have been his brother. The pieces were starting to move fast, too fast. A racist officer had just been exposed. A federal director had been wrongly handcuffed and humiliated. A teenage boy had offered his seat on a bus and was now at the center of a mystery that stretched back decades. And somewhere in all of this was a hidden story, a buried past, and a powerful woman who knew exactly how to pull the first thread. The storm hadn't hit yet, but the clouds were growing darker,